Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Allah Almighty says in the Holy Quran, Ala inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Verily, the friends of Allah are those upon whom the fear doesn't come, nor do they grieve. Alladhina amanu, and those who believe in the Allah Almighty, wa kanu yattaqun, and these fill the duties towards Allah Almighty. Lahumul bushra fil hayatid dunya, and for these Allah Almighty has announced good tidings fil hayatid dunya wa fil akhirah, in this world and hereafter. Lahumul bushra fil hayatid dunya wa fil akhirah, la tabdila li kalimatillah, and the words of Allah Almighty do not change. Sadaqallahul Azim, the words of Allah are true. Today we shall speak on the life history and the propagatory contribution made by His Eminence Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh. The discussion comprises of a few parts. First of all, I would like to discuss the name of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh. Dear listeners and viewers, if we just look at the name suggests many things about His Eminence Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh. The name is Muinuddin, and Chishti suggests that he belonged to a certain chain in Sufism, and this chain is entitled as Chishti chain. And this is why he is regarded as one of the greatest contributor in this field of spirituality, because he actually introduced this chain of Sufism in a certain area on the face of earth, and that is known as the subcontinent in Ajmer. And the other title, Ajmeri, is also suggesting one important factor, that Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh specified for his services a certain land on which he served the mankind without any discrimination. If we just look at the titles that were given to His Eminence Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, one of the most famous titles is Sultanul Hind. He is regarded as the King of India. And if we just look at why do we call him Sultanul Hind, because he has served a lot to the humanity and the mankind living and residing in the continent. They were having a very loyal relationship with Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. Even today, you would find many people who go and pay services and visits to the shrine of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh. Then there is another title that was given to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh, and that is called Khwaja Garib Nawaz, the benefactor of the poor. According to his teachings, whatever he taught his disciples and followers, to serve the poor people, to serve the needy people, to help the needy people. And this why he was given another title, Khwaja Garib Nawaz, the benefactor of the poor. Now we are coming to another important point of his life, that is his childhood. He passed the same childhood as many of us normally do. The important point of his childhood is when we see that Ibrahim Qunduzi, a well-known Sufi, when he visited to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti in a garden, so we see this thing that when Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala Alayh presented some fruit to Ibrahim Qunduzi, so Ibrahim Qunduzi as a reward presented him a piece of bread, and he urged Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti to take that bread. As soon as Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti took that bread, so there comes a spiritual transformation. His whole self, which was previously there, was completely transformed and changed. And after eating that piece of bread, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti felt this thing that he is not what he was. So therefore, that is the introduction of the spirituality, and I should say that was the experience, the spiritual experience that Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti had with Ibrahim Qunduzi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. The most important thing that we need to see is that after that experience, he sought Islamic education. He sought classical Islamic sciences, and he started learning all Islamic classical sciences, and for that he took journey around the world. Wherever he found good teachers, expert teachers in Islamic classical sciences, he went, he sought knowledge, he received all forms of knowledge, and when he returned, he took bay'ah on the hand of His Eminence Usman Haruni. He was his spiritual master. He actually introduced him. He took bay'ah in the chain of Chishtiya. And, according to a certain tradition or report, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam comes in his dream and asks him and urges him to serve the mankind and in a certain land of India that is known as Ajmer. And after that, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti decides this thing that he is going to go there because it was the order of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam to serve mankind there. Then he took the journey right into the Ajmer Sharif, which later on became a permanent abode for Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. One of the important points which is normally ignored, and I think in the contemporary world that is very much pertinent and we need to focus upon it, that Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti was a classical Islamic scholar. At the same time, he was a spiritual master. He had two ways to propagate the message of Islam, but he prefers one and leaves another. It doesn't mean that the another that was left out was not important or was not significant and was not productive. That is something else. The important point that is to be noted is that he preferred the other one, the spiritual path. Through a spiritual path, he was of the opinion that he can propagate the message of Islam in a wonderful fashion, and that has turned out to be, because through his spiritual message, he converted many people into the fold of Islam, and that was very, very productive. So the point is to be noted is that on the one hand, we can preach Islam in a scholarly way, in which there is a dialogical process, in which a reasoning is involved, in which logic is involved, in which you present something and the critique is developed, then you respond to that, and in this way the discussion goes on and you try to convince and win the argument. Whereas there is another path. And what is that? That you need not to engage other into the discussions. What you need to do is put simply Islam into practice. And as soon as people would come to know, would come across, would experience your life, they would change themselves. And this is what exactly Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh did. He was open to everybody. And one of the salient features of his teaching was sulhun likul, that peace for everybody. And if we just look at when he started his message, his preaching, when he started his propagatory message, when he started his propagation, he was open to everybody without any discrimination. I mean, there was no check and balances in terms of, there was no filtration in terms of who is coming to His Eminence Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. Everybody can come, irrespective of his color, irrespective of his gender, irrespective of his language, irrespective of his race. He was open to anybody, even irrespective of Muslims and non-Muslims. And that's why we find that he set standards, he set examples for all the people who are coming after him, that this is the best way to communicate the message of Allah Almighty. And this is the most productive way to propagate the message of Allah Almighty. And the important thing is, in the scholarly method, we can find out that there are always disagreements. There are always a kind of, non-agreements. But in a spiritual way, when you start this journey, when you start preaching Islam through this way, you do not find things to be happening in this way. You do not find things to be ending up in that way. The only thing is that you show what Islam is. You provide the opportunity how Islam can be experienced. You provide the sweetness of Islam to experience, and you present them to them. In a scholarly way, we find that Islam is presented in terms of form. Islam is always presented in terms of what Islam says about something. But when, somebody comes in the fold of Islam, he says that what Islam is, how can I feel it? How can I experience Islam? So it are the spiritual masters. It is the Sufism. It are the spiritual masters who can provide you the facility to experience what Islam is. And that's why many people argue that Sufism is basically the substance of Islam. What is required in every action from Allah Almighty is basically what Sufis teach. And therefore, we should not ignore this fact that Sufis have made great contribution in this regard, in serving Islam, in propagation Islam. Therefore, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti presents a unique case in the propagation machinery, in the sense that he presented Islam through his practices, through his through his personality, through his actually direct practices, rather than engaging others into argumentation, engaging others into rational inquiry, engaging others with arguments, nothing like that. Simply, this is what Islam is, I'm putting that into practice, and you can simply watch and you can apply it on your own life. There is another important point, that when Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti started his work in Ajmer Sharif, you can easily find out that he was open to everybody. As I said, sulhun likul, peace for everybody. So people belonging to different religions, they used to pay visit, they used to discuss their problems with Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, and he used to resolve them without any condition, without any charges, without any conditions at all. He simply went out there to serve the mankind, and he did that. And many of them converted to the fold of Islam just because of this reason, because there was no contract at all. There was no kind of give and take at all. It was simply for the sake of a very sincere effort to serve the mankind. And this is what we scholars, what we, the people, the common people, have to understand and get a message from the life of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, that we have to be sincere with our work. We have to be sincere with Allah Almighty. We have to be sincere with our religion. And Allah Almighty keeps an eye every time on us, that what we are doing and what we are intending. And Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh gives us exact the same example, that this is how a common Muslim should behave, this is how a scholar behave, this is how a Sufi and a spiritual master should behave. Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh wrote two books which are very famous. One of them is Anisul Arwah and the other one is Dalilul Arifin. The teachings that are left for the people to follow were that the generosity. The people should be generous towards others. And this generosity, he used the expression that this generosity should be like river. The way the river is generous, similarly the disciples, particularly the disciples of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Ajmeri rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, and those people who have some kind of respect for Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Ajmeri rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, or who are, a kind of loyals to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Ajmeri rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, he urges his disciples, his followers, his well-wishers, that they should show and display generosity in their behavior towards everybody, irrespective of gender, irrespective of color, irrespective of language, irrespective of race. Not only that, he also goes further and he says that the affection should also be displayed. And affection should be displayed like a sun. The way the sun is huge, similarly, the affection should be unending and unstoppable to everybody. Similarly, there is another important point which we find around ourselves to be lacking among people, and that is the humbleness. There is no humbleness at all. And he says that we need hospitality. Hospitality like earth. The way the earth serves every single human being on the face of earth. Similarly, the disciples and the followers of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti were requested by their spiritual master to show their hospitality the way the earth shows hospitality towards them. Then, if we just come to the basic teachings of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, he always taught his disciples that there should be renunciation. There should be renunciation with the material things. And renunciation of the material things is that you should fashion your life, you should design your life, you should discipline your life in such a way that you remain less dependent upon the world. And that is what is meant by the renunciation of the world. And as you know, the more you engage yourself in the world, the more you indulge yourself in the worldly affairs, the more you become dependent upon the world. And the more you become dependent upon the world, the more the world attracts you towards itself, and the more it distances you from Allah Almighty. And this is what was the aim of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, that the creatures of Allah Almighty should pay more concentration and should spend more time with Allah Almighty rather than with the world. And therefore the fundamental part of his teachings was the renunciation with the material things. And this why, many things that actually end up in psychological problem, in the social problem, or in the economic problem of our everyday life are simply because we actually engage ourselves, we are actually attracted towards the worldly affairs. And that was a kind of, a root method analysis that was carried out by Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. And he said that, you have to overcome on your basic needs. You have to overcome on this problem that your needs should be limited. They should be confined. They cannot be stopped because that is the part of your nature. You can't stop eating. You can't stop, drinking water. But you can confine them. You can reduce the number of, intakes. This is what was, the basic fundamental part of his teaching. Then there is another important contribution made by Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, and that was the introduction of the sama. According to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, sama is something which can really be used as a legitimate tool to, transform your spiritual self, to bring changes in yourself. And sama is something which I should say, a kind of a technique that is introduced by, that is in fact invented by the Sufis. And the greatest invention in the Sufi tradition, and particularly in the Chishti tradition, is the invention of the sama. And this sama has got certain etiquettes to be followed. For example, anybody cannot be allowed to participate in the process of the sama. And, there were certain etiquettes. If we just look at and the teachings of the Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, we would find that sama, if somebody is participating in that, he has to be fully purified. And what does it mean? It means that he has to perform the ablution, and he has to be, he has to perform all these, ceremonies in that particular way. So the sama was the greatest contribution made by Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, and that is the technique. Many people might be asking this question, that what Muslims have invented. Of course, the first of the basic necessity of the invention comes only when you're lacking some methodologies to please Allah Almighty. Now, because that was the basic objective of the life, so Muslims invented different methods through which they could please Allah Almighty. They could earn the pleasure of Allah Almighty. They could please Allah Almighty by different methods. And one of the methods that was introduced by the Sufis, and particularly Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, was the sama. And he also, he also relegated it, and he also, termed it as a legitimate, lawful institution through which you can really transform yourself. Then there is another important, contribution of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti that we find in the subcontinent and later on in many other Sufi tradition, was that he refrained, he asked his followers not to participate in the political life. And why? If we just go back to his, first teaching, we would find that in the previous teaching, in the renunciation of the material life, we find that you are engaged in the world. And not participation in the world means that you should not be as much as engaged in the worldly affairs. And this why the political participation was somehow confined by Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. With this brief introduction on Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Ajmeri Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh and his services, particularly in the region of subcontinent India, I can I can conclude this whole discussion with the prayer that Allah Almighty keep us on the right path. Jazakallahu fid darini ahsan al jaza. Thank you very much.
Ya Garib Nawaz, tu wali hind hai beguma, tu hai is zameen ka asman.